Hello everyone, welcome to Chilling Tales Archive. Are you ready for today's story? Let's start right now. In our daily lives, if a person who looks ordinary and behaves steadily suddenly starts to act strange and incomprehensible one day, there are usually two ways of explaining it. One is that this person may have some mental problems. Another theory, which is closer to popular belief, is that he might have been possessed by an evil spirit. Today, we will put aside the first explanation for now. We are going to talk about the latter. The issue of being possessed by evil spirits has actually been discussed in psychology. As Jung once proposed, the so-called being possessed by evil spirits is most likely a certain latent personality within a person, which seizes the dominant position under specific inducements, thus causing a strong deviation in the person's behavior. The occurrence of this phenomenon is often closely related to the individual's inner state, growth environment, religious atmosphere, and even the imagination or worship of ghosts and gods. If we regard it as a kind of subconscious self-protection, it may be understandable. But if not just one person but dozens of people showed similar possessed conditions at the same time period and in the same place, how can we explain it? Today we are going to talk about a real event: Malaysian high school students collectively possessed by evil spirits. Let's start with the news reports at the time. It was a news article published on May 18, 2010, with a very direct title: Ghost Hysteria. 40 students hit by mysterious symptoms. The whole incident took place in a secondary school in Perak, Malaysia. According to reports, about 40 students from different grades showed extremely abnormal behaviors over a few days, including aggressive attacks, howling and crying, cursing, and even fighting. The news pointed out that this situation has actually lasted for nearly 2 months, and the school would fall into a brief chaos almost every day. One of the riots took place between 8 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., and the school finally announced an emergency suspension of classes at 12 noon. According to an eyewitness, students who are so-called possessed often have sudden changes in mood without any warning. They will suddenly shout, speak incoherently, become aggressive, or run around the campus as if being pulled by some invisible force. This has put a lot of pressure on teachers. In order to deal with these emergencies, teachers dare not relax almost throughout the class and are ready to intervene at any time. In order to calm the situation, the school tried to hold some spiritual activities, including organizing students to recite sacred verses from the Quran in order to seek peace. Among them, a 16-year-old student said in an interview that they had seen ghosts during the school training camp at the end of March. After that, the school also invited 4 traditional healers, who were called Bomo by the locals, to solve the problem through traditional means. A disturbing description also pointed out that 10 students were simultaneously attacked by unknown forces while reciting the Quran in the school prayer hall. The Education Bureau also intervened at the first time, activated the emergency mechanism, and promised to continue to track the development of the incident. On the day of the interview, the reporter personally heard students screaming in the school. At the end of the incident, it was mentioned that several students showed aggressive behavior and finally ran out of energy and had to be forcibly stopped by the teachers. This is the footage restored by the news. Next, we will further uncover the true details behind the incident from the perspective of a man named H, who is also an eyewitness to this school. H grew up in a small town in Perak, Malaysia. When the incident happened, He had just entered the first grade of junior high school. H recalled that the class time for the first grade students was different from that for other grades, as they had afternoon classes, while the students from the second grade to the second grade of high school had classes in the morning and went out of school in the afternoon. It was an afternoon in May 2010, and H walked into the campus as usual. But as soon as he stepped into the school gate, he felt something was wrong. The students who came towards me were senior students who were leaving school. That day, their state was obviously different from usual. They were whispering in groups of 3 or 5, with panic and anxiety written all over their faces. Although H did not learn any substantive content from them at that time, the feeling that the air became heavier made his heart tighten a little. However, after all, he was a freshman in junior high school and was not familiar with the senior students, so he did not ask more questions. He walked into the classroom as usual. H's class ranks third in the first grade, with less than 30 students. Boys and girls usually get along well with each other. But that day, when H sat in the classroom, he clearly felt that the atmosphere was strange. It was unusually quiet and so depressing that it made him feel suffocated. There was no laughter or playfulness in the classroom. Everyone had a serious expression and kept their heads down. It was as if a storm was hovering overhead. H was just about to ask his classmates what had happened when the classroom door opened and the teacher walked in. I thought the teacher would start the class as usual, but unexpectedly, the first sentence he said made the atmosphere in the whole class freeze. The teacher didn't beat around the bush and said directly, "Some unusual things have happened in the school recently. Some senior students are suspected to be possessed by evil spirits." The classroom suddenly fell silent. Even the cheerful and lively students subconsciously held their breath. The teacher then explained some typical manifestations of being possessed by evil spirits. Some students suddenly burst out with amazing power, as if they were out of control. Some would scream and talk nonsense, speaking a language that was completely incomprehensible. And for some others, their voices became completely different from their own during an attack, as if they were speaking a different person. Although the teacher spoke in a calm and restrained manner, the more creepy it was. H was stunned at the time. He couldn't understand it. How could a teacher talk about being possessed so seriously in public? He later thought that this phenomenon was not deliberately avoided, perhaps because of the strong religious and cultural atmosphere in the local area. More importantly, perhaps this matter can no longer be suppressed. After the teacher finished speaking, the class that was supposed to start barely continued. The reason was simple: students from other classes had an attack again. Several teachers rushed to the scene of the accident and the classroom became chaotic for a while. H's class was located in the middle of the school, next door to the experimental classroom where accidents occurred most frequently. That day, several students who were possessed were sent to the laboratory one after another. It is said that they often fall into a state of collapse or coma after an attack and need to lie on a large table to slowly regain consciousness. This classroom was equipped with enough long tables, and it became a temporary shelter. For H and his classmates, these scenes were unprecedented. A few naughty boys even couldn't help but sneak to the classroom door to see what was happening next door. But the door had already been guarded by several teachers, and they were strictly forbidden to approach. In the end, H went home from school with a head full of doubts and anxieties. That day, he did not see the ghost, nor heard any ghost voice. But somewhere in a corner of my heart, the seed of fear has been quietly planted. After what he saw and heard the day before, the indescribable feeling of uneasiness in H's heart became stronger. As soon as he arrived at school that day, he took the initiative to find out more about the rumors of being possessed by evil spirits. Sure enough, what the seniors said was even more bizarre than he had imagined. Initially, only a few students in the school behaved abnormally, and the teachers did not take it seriously at first, thinking that the students were tired of studying or were overwhelmed by exams. But as similar incidents occurred frequently, several teachers realized that something was wrong. What started out as isolated cases spread to multiple classes within a few days. There is often no warning when students who are possessed by evil spirits have an attack. Some suddenly scream and shout, some speak incoherently, and some simply stand up in the classroom and rush to the podium as if they are controlled by something. The most exaggerated incident was when a petite girl suddenly had an emotional outburst with incredible strength. The teacher in charge of the class at the time tried to stop her but was unable to stop her. As the situation got out of control, 3 or 4 male students came to help. But the girl who was supposed to be quiet and gentle seemed like a different person, grabbing, kicking, pulling, and swinging. She didn't look like a student at all, but more like some kind of violent beast. She even slapped the principal so hard that the sound was so clear that it could be heard echoing in the corridor. It was not until more teachers arrived that they finally subdued her, and the whole school watched the whole process. H learned from his seniors that such attacks occur almost every day. At noon, the broadcasting system began to play recitations from the Quran over and over again, as if trying to suppress the invisible commotion with divine power. The school is not standing idly by. Soon, several Muslim religious teachers were urgently transferred in. They had religious identities, similar to Islamic priests, and were also respected by students as religious mentors. These mentors began to communicate with the possessed, more precisely, to negotiate with the spirits that possessed them. H did not personally witness these negotiations, but he heard some of the details. The religious teachers would whisper scriptures and talk to the spirits. They were trying to figure out where these spirits came from, why they were gathered here, and what they wanted. It is said that some spirits will respond through the mouths of the possessed students with distorted and strange voices. Not all of them are malicious, and some even show willingness to cooperate. However, the conditions they offered were horrifying. A few days later, H came to school as usual in the morning, but found that there were only 7 or 8 students sitting in the classroom that originally accommodated about 30 people. The hallways were deserted and silent, and attendance in other classes was equally dismal. The teacher simply gathered all the students in the cafeteria and let them study on their own for the whole day. The radio was still on, with verses from the Quran playing in a loop 24 hours a day. H sat in the cafeteria, looking at the sky outside the window, which was sometimes cloudy and sometimes sunny, and felt like a stone was pressing on his heart. The low-frequency humming in the broadcast made him feel anxious. He kept thinking, what on earth could have moved into this school? On the 3rd day, H finally heard more detailed news about those religious negotiations. It turned out that after the first outbreak of evil spirits, the school did reach some kind of agreement with some spirits. It is said that these spirits once used the body of a boy and expressed their desire to leave, but made a request. Please find a new place for us to settle down and send us off in a grand manner. Otherwise, the consequences will be very serious. This spirit claimed that it had existed for 600 years. Its tone was calm, but it carried a sense of oppression that could not be ignored. Therefore, the school urgently called everyone together to carry out a ritual migration. They dispatched several school buses, placed an egg on the seat of each bus, and then drove off in an unknown direction. No one knew what the eggs represented or where they were sent. When H heard this, he felt that the world suddenly became strange. Everything and everyone around him seemed to be guided by another law. It was not the world he was familiar with, and it was not a world that could be explained by common sense. The brief calm lasted for a few days. Then, a larger scale of evil spirit possession incidents broke out. It was more violent than the first time, and the situation was even more out of control. This time, the media was also alarmed, and even the Education Bureau sent people to the school to investigate. In order to resolve the crisis, the school even invited Bomo, a traditional Malay wizard. The wizard's claims are disturbing. Last time you invited the spirits away, you didn't set up a new barrier. The old barrier has been broken, but there are traces left. As a result, new spirits continue to pour in, attracting more wandering spirits, and eventually forming a powerful spirit-gathering magnetic field. The door was opened, but no one closed it. So they came back, more numerous and stronger. After the second outbreak, the school finally made a dramatic move. They sealed off most of the toilets, not by simply putting padlocks on them, but by sealing all the entrances with cement. This move made many people suddenly realize. It turns out that the origin of the whole thing may have been laid in the toilet. H remembers that on his first day of school, he felt that the atmosphere in the school toilet was weird. Some toilet doors were tightly closed with "Do not use" signs posted on them. It was dark and moldy inside, as if no one had been there for a long time. The few remaining toilets were inexplicably cold and depressing. At the time, he thought he was overthinking it. But now it seems that perhaps some things have never really left this campus. During this period, the abnormalities within the school have spread beyond the living circle. That night, H attended cram school as usual. Since his parents were having dinner with the teacher's friends, H took the teacher's car to go with them. The tutors were a couple. The female teacher took H into the car first, while the male teacher stayed in the classroom to clean up. After waiting for a long time, the male teacher still didn't show up. The female teacher got a little impatient and called to urge him. As soon as the call was connected, the female teacher's expression suddenly changed. A child's shrill cry was heard from the telephone receiver, a tearing cry that pierced the silence of the night. Although the phone was not on speaker, H, who was sitting in the back seat, could still hear it clearly. His heart tightened and his breathing stagnated. The female teacher asked in shock, "What happened over there? Why is there a child crying?" The male teacher looked confused. "No, I just came back to get some information I forgot." "What's wrong? You really didn't hear the child crying?" "No, I'm the only one in the classroom." Not long after the phone call ended, the male teacher walked out of the classroom and sat in the driver's seat as usual. Inside the car, the three of them said nothing. Outside the window, the shadows of the trees swayed strangely under the street lights. That phone call became the most inexplicable episode in this routine night walk. H still remembers it to this day. A few days later, H met a senior schoolmate on the street again, who was also one of the eyewitnesses of that incident. At first, the senior student was very secretive about this past event. But under H's questioning, she finally spoke up and told him a moment that he would never forget. That day, the senior was sitting in the classroom and attending class. There was a commotion outside, so the teacher left to help deal with it. In just these few minutes, the expression of an Aboriginal girl sitting next to her suddenly changed drastically. Her eyeballs slowly rolled back, her eyes became blurry, and her body began to twitch violently. After a few seconds, she seemed like a completely different person, waving her hands, shouting, and her face was ferocious. Several students rushed forward and tried to hold her down, including the senior student. But no one expected that this thin girl would burst out with amazing strength and even make crisp, cracking sounds of bones while struggling. In the chaos, she suddenly turned her head and stared at her senior, her eyes burning with resentment. Then he shouted in a very sharp Malay voice, "I'll remember you. I will definitely find you. Just wait." The voice pierced into the soul, as if it came from the depths of hell. The senior student was so frightened that she let go of her hand instantly, took several steps back, and her face turned pale. She later told H, "That sentence itself wasn't scary. What was really scary was the eyes she used when she stared at me. Those were not human eyes at all." After the "I'll remember you" threat, the senior student began to have frequent nightmares. The scenes in her dreams were always broken, dark, and damp. Sometimes she dreamed that the girl was looking at her at the end of the school corridor, and sometimes in the bathroom mirror, and those eyes never left. At this time, the campus has completely become a center of chaos. After the second outbreak of collective possession, horror stories were staged almost every day on campus. Some students suddenly ran hysterically in the corridor. Some cried as if something was chasing them, and some suddenly slammed their desks in class, stared at the ceiling with empty eyes, and talked to themselves. The radio was still playing the Quran, but the effect seemed to be getting smaller and smaller. Some people said that the more they read, the more it seemed to disturb something. The sound traveled farther and more frequently. In addition to the chaos on campus, accidents also began to occur outside the campus. Just on the road in front of the school's main entrance, several bizarre car accidents occurred over several consecutive days. In one of the incidents, an Indian male student was killed. That day, he had just walked out of the school gate and stood on the zebra crossing to cross the road. A van that usually drove slowly suddenly accelerated without any warning and hit him directly. According to the teacher who witnessed the incident, the boy seemed to be pushed out by something. His body suddenly jumped forward before the impact, as if something invisible was pushing him hard from behind. The crash was sharp and piercing. Passers-by screamed. The driver braked suddenly, and the air was filled with the smell of burning tires and blood. The teacher who witnessed the incident was stunned. She stood by the road, watching the ambulance take the boy away, her eyes empty. She always remembered that the wind at that moment did not blow a single leaf. That evening, she dragged her exhausted body back home. Her son was young and had gone to bed upstairs. She and her husband sat in the living room, turned on the TV, and tried to relieve the shock of the day. But as she watched, the sound from the TV began to become fuzzy. It was not a problem with the sound system, but she suddenly felt that someone was looking at her from behind. That feeling is like cold air rushing up from the spine to the brain, making the hair stand on end. She forced herself to remain calm and whispered to her husband, "Do you feel like there's something behind you?" The husband was silent for a second, then said, "I just wanted to ask you the same thing." The two looked at each other and instantly felt a chill down their spines, not daring to move. In this eerie silence, the TV program entered the commercial break. When the commercial ended, the screen went black for a moment and was about to switch back to the program. And at that moment, in the reflection of the black screen of the TV, at the same time, they saw a figure standing behind the sofa, staring down at them motionlessly. It was a face that was both familiar and unfamiliar. It was exactly the Indian student who was hit and killed that day. The two barely slept that night. The husband quietly checked that all the doors and windows were locked and placed a scripture on the bedside. From then on, the teacher went to bed with the lights on every night. She no longer dared to get too close to the TV and even replaced the one in the living room. She said, "It's not the TV's fault. It's that the black screen is too real." Back to school. After the second large-scale possession incident, the school finally took more drastic measures. Most of the toilets mentioned above were sealed with cement. In addition, wizards were invited to reset the barrier again. They selected the four corners of the school as the landing points and used traditional Malay rituals to seal the entrances through which the spiritual energy flowed. It is said that the wizard brought an old wooden box that day, which contained a black chicken, a yellow talisman, a red thread, and a snake bone. The ceremony lasted for a whole day until the sun completely set. Some students saw the wizard drawing strange patterns on the ground and muttering something from afar. Then, they put the eggs back on the school bus and drove away together. No one knows where they went. Perhaps it is what a spirit calls a new residence. At this point in the story, many people may ask, what happened in this school before? This is also the question H has been trying to figure out. But both the teachers and the old school workers are very secretive about it. Regarding the sealed toilet, some people said that a student committed suicide in it, and some people said that some kind of urn was dug out. But there is no definite answer. H recalled that on the first day of his first year in junior high school, he noticed that the closed toilet doors were always wet, even when it was a dry and sunny day outside. There was often a faint scent of sandalwood in the air, which seemed to be there and not there, as if something had already lived there long before he came. Now, many years have passed since this incident. H has already graduated and left the small town, but this experience is deeply engraved in his memory and has never faded. Sometimes he would think, if spirits really exist, why did they choose that school? And why did those 40-odd students become their target? More importantly, what is reported in the news is just the tip of the iceberg. According to him, the number of students who were truly possessed by evil spirits was far more than 40. Some students even took a long-term leave of absence from school and their health deteriorated. It was as if their souls had been taken away by something, leaving only an empty shell. Perhaps we will never know the truth. Conclusion. In some corner of the world, in a place we have never heard of, a similar story may be quietly unfolding. They were covered up, forgotten, or deliberately sealed up, but they truly existed. Perhaps it is these possession incidents that we cannot explain or quantify that make us realize there is a whole new world beyond science. Beyond rationality, perhaps there is them. Well, that's the story for this issue. I am Chilling Tales Archive, a friend who will accompany you into the night with stories. If you like today's story, please like and subscribe. Or, if you have ever experienced similar weird things, please share them in the comments section. See you next time.